Hi, everyone. Welcome to the HER LearnX Network session. We have with us Hannah. Oh, she's a board member of Verde Agritech and also the co-founder of IXO. Let's hear from her how we could transform the future through purposeful leadership and sustainability. Now, Hannah, before we begin, it'd be good to understand what you do and what inspired you to take on the role that you're in right now.
Sure. Thank you, Renee, for having me. So my inspiration to sustainability started in university. I studied economics. I was awarded a Kofi Annan scholarship. So my mission has always been, okay, how do I make an impact and bring some social changes? I debated whether to go into the NGO path, working for the United Nations, or go into the private sector. And it was my class during development class that I got an inspiration and an aha moment that the bottom 2 billion population are mostly engaged in agriculture, and many of them rely on technology to really advance their livelihood. So rather than me going into the NGO world, I wanted to go into the corporate world to really learn the know-hows of technology advancements and innovation that will directly bring higher yield and higher income for the farming population. So that was my genesis of how I started 15 years ago with Bayer. And it brought me around all different parts of the world with different leadership roles in both commercial space as well as in sustainability. And after 15 years, I started having my entrepreneurial itch, and I realized that I wanted to really address bigger ecosystem and not be handcuffed to just representing one company when it comes to sustainability topics. So that's when I started my investment and advisory platform, really helping companies and businesses to look for right commercial opportunities, growth opportunities across agriculture, food, carbon markets, and also nutrition, food tech sector.
Wow, fantastic. And from Bayer as a corporate leader all the way down to being an entrepreneur, I believe you have faced several challenges or very different challenges as a corporate leader versus an entrepreneur. And what are some of the challenges you have faced, right, while navigating these diverse roles across the regions and how these experiences shaped your approach to sustainability?
Yeah. I think whether you're working in US or Europe or in Singapore or in Indonesia, you're always working with people, right? So the biggest challenge is how do you build trust amongst people that you work with, regardless of nationality and across different cross-cultural barriers. It's really, I think the biggest solution is how do you build that authentic relationship? So once you build that, I think many of the contextual problems that you're trying to solve, whether you're in a role to address water scarcity across Bangladesh, or whether you're talking about technology transfer in North America farming environment, as long as you have that trusting kind of collaborative environment, you can overcome, I would say, many challenges. I think pertaining to particularly sustainability, this is a topic that is highly sugar-coated, and many of companies are, I would say, claiming and kind of playing in the surface area. And this is where I do see it creates a lot of uncertainty because there's no depth, and that really is driven by lack of data, in my view, because there is no real quantifiable measurement and real-time measurement that we can rely on. And that's why we rely a lot on anecdotes and self-reported data and manual data. So that creates a real challenge of building confidence and more investors coming into this climate and sustainability area. I think that is something for us to hopefully I can help address through different technologies that I'm aware of and also have been part of building.
Hmm. And your journey has reached a commercial leadership as well as sustainability advocacy. So, what are some of your personal values or moments of realization that drove this alignment in your career?
Yeah. I think commercial success today in today's world is not independent of your sustainability ESG strategy. And this is where things have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, a leadership is in place or a company is leading in a position for only short-term gains. It has to be a long-term play. And I will give an example where previous company that I used to work for, Bayer, we had actually the head of the company, who's a CEO of the company, be also take on the role of chief sustainability officer because everything you do has to be with sustainability in mind. It's not two different sets of strategy, right? So I realized that with that example, that really this is the path. Everything that you breathe, everything that you do as part of your corporate and commercial practice with a very big focus on profit because you can't just sway to just being sustainable company and lose out on profitability. But how do you actually gain those both profit as well as impact at the same time? And it has to be hand in hand. And it's not a rocket science. I think there are now more and more solutions and regulatory environment that makes us actually look into that innovation. So we sometimes have to be forced as a society to look for those innovation where we can change our practices to be inherently sustainable.
And in the investment side of things, right? What will be your investment thesis? And how do you invest in, businesses that are both profitable, yet they bring impact, yet they're sustainable? Is there a formula? Yeah.
I think there's no formula, but personally, I look for companies that I can help create value. So it has to be in an area that I know well. I'm not going to go in already, all of a sudden invest in a space company because that's something that I don't really know very well, or logistics per se, right? So I'm just giving an example. For a investment thesis, it has to be an area that I personally can create value and unlock that potential. So yeah, my investment thesis is really around companies that I can help create value. So it leverages the knowledge that I have around carbon markets and agriculture and food.
Mhm.
Companies that I am very bullish on is now more, I used to focus on more B2B solutions, but now I'm much more bullish on rise of sustainable consumerism, so circularity. And that's because more consumers are now demanding sustainable products and sustainable manufacturing and supply chain. So one of the companies that I'm looking at right now as an investment is companies that are reproducing consumer product that is made out of sustainable materials, both upstream and also downstream. Right. That means that is the material being produced from crops that are, sequencing more carbon? Is there a midstream that can actually convert that crop into something replacing, for example, plastics, right? And does that have a consumer angle? Is there a willingness from a consumer to pay for such product, right? So in between that, in order to do that, of course, traceability becomes really important because consumers have to have more confidence that it actually comes from the right source and that they're paying premium for the right reasons. So that's kind of like one area that I'm looking at is really new materials that can replace everyday choices for consumers.
Right, fantastic. And what do you think are some of the qualities or mindset that are essential when you look out for these founders whom you're gonna invest in, right? Who could aim to drive this meaningful impact, especially in today's fast-changing world where profit is like number one thing that people are looking out for. But at the same time, to make sure the sustenance in the business they got to make money at the same time, help the society and be green. So what are some of the mindset or qualities you think such founders or leaders should have?
I think as a for-profit organization, a leader and founder should be somebody who has the right vision, but somebody who also knows how to build the right team. I think ultimately it's not going to be up until perhaps maybe seed stage. It could be a founder with a lot of family and friends money. But once you start scaling, it becomes a real quality of how can you build teams and lead teams and build a team that is diverse, that can actually help complement many different aspects of the challenges that's to come, right? So I think agility as a core competency is really important because we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complicated, right? And I think it will be commercially, after a certain stage of the company, commercially savvy and financially savvy founders and entrepreneurs with a authentic heart and not losing the purpose that they begin with, right? Which is around social impact or environmental impact, right? If we're talking about climate tech or sustainable companies. So I think those are the qualities, is really ability to lead, ability to create commercial roadmap, because technologies can be easily copied. And we live in a world where technology changes very fast. So not necessarily just banking on the product itself, but really focusing on the market and the demand side of things.
As someone who has championed collaboration and innovation as well, how should leaders or founders balance the ambition to grow? They probably do much better in their local context. But there is a need to also globalize and bring impact to the world instead of to the specific region that they're covering. So, what are some of the key strategies you think that they should adopt for a more, lasting and positive sort of outcome to globalize the business? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer of strategic partnerships, right? So this is where there are founders, and I've seen many founders where control becomes letting go of control and dilution becomes a big issue, right? So as you scale, obviously you'll bring in more investors and more strategic partners, and you may need to pivot as a founder from your original vision or your idea, right? So I think it has to be welcoming. It has to be somebody who welcomes those opportunities and has to see that the merit of 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 5, right? So there's a multiplier effect to growing the business.
Wow, so it's a multiplier effect that we should be thinking of. And it's not always 1 + 1 = 2, but more than that, because you bring in more of other resources that can help boost the business. And looking back on your journey, what would be some of the most important lessons you've learned that you wish someone had told you at the beginning?
Yeah, I think whether you are an investor or a board member or a founder in a company, I think anybody in their career, in their professional life, is going to experience the need to pivot, or, or feeling of being stuck, right? And sometimes unhappiness. And I wish that I knew early on that when you have signals to get into a new area or wanting to pivot, listening to the heart and listening to the voices are going to be really helpful. Because, for example, for me, it came to a point after, many people say, why aren't you just, climbing the corporate ladder? Or why don't you stay in corporate, right? You've done so well. I realized that there's the moment you lose your spark, or you're not able to feel that you can bring your whole self to what you do every day and finding meaning in that, that's a very good indication to really start thinking about what's your true purpose, right? And I think there's going to be many moments to change and many moments where these realizations will happen. And I think welcoming pivot is very important, right? So pivot with intention, pivot with right thoughtfulness and experimentation. So it's not going to happen overnight, but preparing for that through, trial and error, and welcoming new experiences, there's going to be emergence of new, I would say, opportunities.
Mm. And what would be your advice to give to budding entrepreneurs who want to make a difference in sustainability or impact, but also feel really overwhelmed by the, expectations, right? But the scale of global challenges, the expectations from investors to perform and be really profitable. It's really a balance to strike, right? So what would be your advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, no one can alone solve the issue of social issues that we're seeing, as well as climate issues. It has to be that collective effort. And that's why I also became an entrepreneur so that I can work with diverse set of groups, both public side, on the private side, academia, entrepreneurs, and investors, so that we can create a right coalition to address the problems that we think are really important to be solved, right? So I think narrowing down sustainability as a topic is going to be number one, right? What is that one problem that you wish to solve? And I think that inspiration and that aha moment usually happens when you're actually with the people that you want to serve, right? So oftentimes, I find that usually when it comes to impact investment, it's global north, right? All the global northern hemisphere, Europe, the Nordics, the North American investors, deploying capital into the global south. And there's sometimes a big gap in terms of how we think capital should be mobilized and how it actually be received in the ground. And there's a lot of challenges when you're actually trying to educate the rural population with, let's say, clean water access, how to drink safe drinking water that's clean and well purified, and having access to it. I mean, it starts with literally one village or one household at a time. And there's a lot of implementation challenges and effort that is needed that sometimes capital deployer doesn't really can't imagine. So I would say, if you're an entrepreneur wanting to get into the sustainability space, hop on a plane and get onto a long rides and get to the rural community that you really want to serve. Or it could be community even in Singapore, but it could be less privileged. So being together with your target market is really important, and having deep insights about them is going to be number one starting place. Because if you don't have a very strong problem statement, you may lose your focus on the way while you're building your company. And then I would say there are many various forms and shapes of how you can get into sustainability profession. It's not always about starting a company. There's many ways to really get into this space, whether it is within a corporate framework or whether it is going more into the financial lens and the financial sector of capital deployment, or whether it's going into the NGO side of things. This is so vast. It's such a vast space that there's many rooms for people who can start taking baby steps, right? Until you go into full-blown founder and, taking all the risk, because becoming an entrepreneur is a lot of risk taking, right? So, and you have to be in a certain position to take on those risks. So, yeah, I would say experiment, explore, be with the community that you really want to solve problems for, and take baby steps.
Wonderful. You mentioned about capital deployment. I'm just wondering, how can we raise the amount of capital made available to female founders, or have more female founders gain access to capital? What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I was just last night having a catch-up session with an angel investor who just focuses on female entrepreneurs, because usually female entrepreneurs are much less funded than, white male, or right. So I think now we are fortunate enough to be living in a time that there's awareness for for helping and financing women founders, and appreciating the diversity. So there's many avenues and networks and accelerators dedicated to this.
Okay, so we have to leverage on those. And also, if you could share one inspirational code or message what would that be?
This is where I struggle a lot with as a impact investor. How do I think about philanthropy versus impact investing? And many people ask, okay, aren't they kind of the same? Because usually impact investing also doesn't yield good results or good profit, right? Um, I think the philanthropy sector teach someone how to fish rather than giving them the fish, right? So something with the line of, it's not about just writing a check. If you're a philanthropic donor, just writing a check and hope that good results happen or impact gets made, but teaching somebody how to fish or how to actually make money for themselves in the rural community, in my view, is much more important than just blind donations. So, of course, there are sectors and areas that require strong philanthropic donors. But I think when it comes to addressing livelihood or technology transfer and know-how, I sometimes think that that shouldn't be undermined in the grand scheme of development.
Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today at this HER LearnX Network session. And do follow us for more on-demand videos.